I don't get to gloat much, so just let me gloat for a minute. Because here it is, in real time, I've been proven right. I've been at least partially correct. And I'm going to show you why in a minute. But let me first just say, a couple months back, I made a video about Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street. After a lot of thinking about it and pondering it, because I'm not going to lie, I was very hesitant to make a video about them at first. I was, because, no one really wants to be the first one to bring up something like this up about powerful people. You know what I mean? But it kind of had to be done. And, I'm not trying to say I was the first one to bring it up, but, one of the first few, at the very least. So, what did I talk about, basically? I came on here and I explained, and I know people aren't dumb, but I still came on here because still some people don't understand this. That in the world of business, in companies, right? Especially in, publicly traded companies, the power of the company does not inherently fall on the CEO. The CEO does, have a lot of swing, a lot of control, but the CEO is appointed. They're appointed, right? They're not the, quote, owner of the company. The CEOs are appointed by the owners of the companies to run the company. Now, who are the owners then of these publicly traded companies? Well, they have many owners because it's a publicly traded company. They have a lot of owners. They're called shareholders, okay? These shareholders, right? And they buy a share of the company. That's why they're called shareholders. Now, depending on how many stocks or shares you buy, that really determines how much controllers say you have in the company. Like, for example, I don't know how much the stock in let me just use this as an example of the Cleveland Browns, for example. Let's say I went and I bought stock of the Cleveland Browns. Let's just pretend for a moment. I know that their stocks are worth probably a lot more. But let's just pretend for a moment that I bought a stock from there that was $1. I have $1 worth of stock. I could literally go around and say, guess what, guys? I'm owner of the Cleveland Browns. And it would be partially true because I would be one of the owners, even though my stock and share would be a 0.001% of the entire company. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's technically true. I'm a shareholder in it, but I'm a very small shareholder because I only bought one stock. Now, you have these other people or companies come along who have lots of dough to spend, and they buy a whole bunch of these stocks in a whole bunch of different companies. So that way, they're shareholders in many companies, but not just shareholders, like I would be with my $1. They may have $1 million worth of shares. And in that case, when those big shareholder meetings and stuff come along, they have ultimately the vote. They ultimately hold the biggest vote out of all the shareholders because they own most of the company. You see what I'm saying? They own more of the pie. Therefore, they own more of the profits. So, a lot of these shareholders, though, are usually overlooked because, when you talk about a company, the CEO is, the face of the company. When things go down, things happen, it's usually them that are, coming on the news, talking about it and whatnot. But in reality, they've got masters behind the scene, right? Now, with all that said, you would think, right, that in the U.S., that with all the companies and all the markets, the free market, this and that and the other, all of this, that we would have many, 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 many different people who own some of these companies, when actually that's not true. Exactly. Pretty much any company that you've ever heard of, and every business you've ever heard of that you buy through, at least in the United States. I haven't really looked into it in foreign companies, but a lot of them do as well. There's only 3 main owners. 3. You've got BlackRock, which is the main one. Then you've got Vanguard. and State Street. Now, if you go back on my other video and watch, I revealed to everybody, State Street of the three is the oldest. They've been around pretty much since the beginning, since our founding fathers. Like, and they have very, very strong ties to the Freemasons and all of that. The company of State Street, very strong ties. In fact, the very first Masonic lodge was in the U.S. was on State Street. So, very strong links and ties to them. Vanguard, a little more new than State Street, was founded somewhere in the 60s or 70s, I think. And then we've got Blackrock. Now, they're the new one of all of them. They're like the baby of the three. However, they're the most powerful of the three. They're very powerful. Now, in these three companies' cases, you could very much say that the CEOs more or less run the whole company, because these three companies are the biggest shareholders of every other company. And like, I think 2 out of 3 of these companies are like private. You can't even like invest in them. I think one of them you can. It might be Blackrock. I think you can invest in Blackrock maybe. But it doesn't matter, because the main shareholders are Vanguard and State Street, and vice versa. Like, the 3 of them own each of the 3. Like, they're the 3, like, they own it all. They own it all. These 3 companies. They own everything. That's why I don't even know why we try to pretend like anyone else has any kind of say in anything, when these 3, like, own everything. They own everything. And you know that whole thing where China's been buying up like farmland in the United States? Well, guess who's very much involved in all of that, got their hands all up in it? It's Blackrock. They got their hands all up in it. All up in that mess. Like, in every shady mess, they've got their hands in it. But they're like they're never talked about. They're virtually like never ever talked about by anybody. And, like, those are some facts here. Like, I'm not sitting here saying I know without a doubt that they're involved in anything, like, bad or illegal. No, I don't. I'm just stating the simple fact that they've got their hands in everything. Every single pie, everything. Everything. Now, the main reason why I was coming on this channel talking about them is because they're the ones who profit the absolute most from the child trafficking that's been taking place. And me and many other people have broken it all down. But I'll break it down in real simple terms for you right here, because it can get confusing. They made it confusing on purpose. But basically, back when Biden first took office, right? When he like opened up the borders and all of that stuff. And I'm not trying to get political here. I'm just stating some facts. Some things that took place as a result. Okay? As a result of that, the amount of unaccompanied migrant children, UAC for short, unaccompanied migrant children, meaning children crossing the border without any adults near them. Right? Okay? UACs. The amount of them, like, skyrocketed, like, by 200% or something. Like, it went from, like, less than, like, 30,000 to hundreds of thousands. Like, super quick. So they had to get, like, DHHS involved, or HHS, Human Health Services, the feds. They had to get them involved. They had to set them up so that way that these unaccompanied children would be, like, their benefits, their food, their shelter, and not just them, like anyone else who came, but like especially the UACs. They had like their own DHHS organization set up, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. You'll have to go back and look at my other videos where I talked about it in great detail. So our government sets this up for the unaccompanied migrant children, right? So every unaccompanied migrant children that comes in, that company gets a certain amount of money for every single unaccompanied migrant child that crosses our border. That company gets a certain amount of money from our government. Whether the child even gets the money or not is irrelevant. They do it so that they're able to handle this influx of children crossing our borders. Well, you might be wondering, like I'm wondering, well, if like 90% of them are missing, where'd all that money go towards? Well, My guess, and far be it from me to insinuate that BlackRock had any part in any of this, but they were profiting from it because they were the biggest shareholders in that company that was set up by DHHS. So they were getting direct, just kind of like the private prison systems. Yeah, BlackRock's all in that too. They are. It's like the same concept. It's like the more prisoners in those private prisons, the more money the shareholders get. The more unaccompanied migrant children come over our borders, the more money that company gets. And I'm sure they get even more money when those kids come up missing and never even come to get their benefits. So it's a huge, huge scam that I've talked about and several others have talked about with far more clout than I do. But yet, here we are. Here we are. Here we are. Why don't we read what their latest, this trio, the Three Musketeers, what their newest scam was. The U.S. federal judge has denied motions to dismiss most of the claims of a multi-state lawsuit accusing asset managers Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street of violating antitrust laws and conspiring to use sustainable investment initiatives to manipulate coal markets. And the judge is allowing the lawsuit to proceed. Okay, so let me break it down. So basically, what is going on is some of the coal markets or companies or whatnot are suing BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Because their accusation, it sounds like more or less, is that they... Okay, there are antitrust regulations in place, right? Now, and these regulatory authorities can sometimes like mandate that certain companies divest themselves of assets and stocks and portions of companies, mandate them to prevent them from totally taking over a market, like in this case the energy market. So the coal companies are saying that they're violating these regulations and they are in fact trying to monopolize the energy market is what it sounds like to me. I mean, there are people who know more about this than I do, but that's what I'm getting from it. But let's keep reading. In statements received by ESG today from the asset managers, Vanguard said that it was disappointed in the court's decision, while BlackRock said that the case is based on an absurd theory that coal companies conspired with their shareholders to reduce coal production. And in this case, they're the shareholders. State Street said that the lawsuit remains baseless and without merit, and focused on efforts to advance a new and dangerous antitrust theory, adding that it poses unnecessary risk to investors and energy markets. Now, there is no new antitrust theory. We have antitrust regulations for that reason, BlackRock. So it's not... So you see what they're deflecting what they're doing on the coal markets, basically. That's what they're doing. And I don't know how this would pose a risk to the energy markets, unless by which you mean it poses a risk to you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to say, State Street. Anyways, let's keep reading. The case launched by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and joined by 10 other Republican states in late 2024 claimed that the asset managers acquired large shareholdings in major coal producers in the U.S. and used their combined influence to coerce the companies to cut coal production and accommodate clean energy investment goals, resulting in higher energy costs for U.S. consumers. And now, well, apparently it looks like the Trump administration might agree with this lawsuit. And they have vowed to fight left-wing ideologies who seek to make us weaker and poorer under the guise of ESG. So, okay, ESG, it stands for Environmental Social Governance. Basically meaning that, companies saying that basically that they're not just going to focus on financial, that they also, need to make sure they're doing it responsibly and in a way that's not going to like rape US citizens, and in a way that like, doesn't like defy like regulations. Like kind of like it's like an all-encompassing thing, like to make sure companies follow by, like, it's to keep us from like ruining our planet, to keep people from getting too powerful like they have in the past, and like, all this stuff. It's so, yeah, basically they're accusing them of like, what I just said, of deflecting what they're doing on others, on the ones that are suing. It's like a huge strategy that's been used in recent years. Now, this lawsuit alleges that the firms, Blackrock, Vanguard, State Street, violated the Clayton Act, which prohibits the acquisition of shares of companies in which, quote, the effect of such acquisition may be substantially to lessen competition. In other words, this is supposed to prevent companies like Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street from doing what they've essentially already done in most markets. But now they're, aiming for the energy market, which is a big deal. That's a big deal. And this is what they're claiming that they're doing. That Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street effectively formed a syndicate and agreed to use their collective holdings of publicly traded coal companies to induce industry-wide output reductions. In other words, they're using their influence that they have in these coal companies to reduce their production, driving up demand, driving up the cost. Like, they're not new to this. They're true to this. Like, they know how to make money. And, like, they don't care who they will harm in doing it. By joining initiatives such as the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiatives and Climate Action 100 Plus, noting that each initiative requires commitments from these asset managers to engage with portfolio companies to align with climate goals. So in other words, the Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street, they're like the main shareholders in these coal companies, right? The main decision makers, money makers, and all that. However, it's kind of a conflict of interest because they're aligning with other companies, whose ultimate goal is to like get rid of coal and all of that stuff. So they're using their collective holdings in the energy market to zero in on like one form of energy, basically, lessen like the ability for us. Like, let's say I wanted a house I wanted coal to heat my house. Let's just say I wanted coal to heat my house. Well, they're making it essentially so expensive and way cheaper for the other route and more expensive for the coal, and it's going to hurt the coal companies. And it's not going to hurt Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street, even though they're the main money makers and deal shakers, because they've already got their pies invested in over there in the competition. So you see what they're doing? Do you see what they are doing? And before you ask me, well, Albatross, what is the big deal with all this? This is just coal and energy. Why does this matter? This is such a huge deal because do you want evil people in power to be more powerful? Which is why part of me is wondering why the Trump administration is fighting this. Because just a few months ago, they were empowering BlackRock even more by putting pressure on them to buy the Panama Canal. So now they don't just like own every single company, basically. They control the main trade routes. It's like this is why we all need to like stop. Just stop listening to what people tell you and go read it yourselves. Even me, don't listen to what I'm telling you. Go look into this. You will see what I am saying is true. It is true. I've been looking into this for months. And like the power that these three companies have, it like knows like no bounds. But let me just keep reading. Okay. Notably, the asset managers have all exited or significantly reduced their participation in the climate initiatives. Now, I'm not sure which asset managers are talking about in this part because they just brought up a bunch of other asset managers, the net zero and the climate action. So, you guys we're talking about a bunch of different asset managers at this point, so you all need to be specific about which ones you're talking about. Okay. According to the ruling, the asset managers, I'm assuming Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street, motions argued that as passive okay, yeah, it is. Blackrock, Vanguard, and State Street are claiming that they are passive investors. And they can't be liable under the Clayton Act due to their stock purchases, and that the suit fails to allege a plausible agreement to harm competition. So Blackrock, State Street, and Vanguard are claiming that, we are passive investors, and that this lawsuit, it's not going to allege, some kind of plausible, they're not going to be able to outline how we're harming competition, is what they claim. But in the ruling, the U.S. District Judge, Cartel, said that the state's claims are not vague and conclusory, are not vague and conclusory, but include dozens of specific examples of defendants' conduct supporting this theory. Shoot, I could sit here and give you some examples. But anyways, noting as an example that the firms, quote, allegedly joined certain climate initiatives in which they publicly committed to use their stock to take necessary action on climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So basically they're saying no, that they weren't passive investors. They made vows to do this. And the judge also added, the plaintiffs, the coal companies that are suing, have identified enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that defendants agreed to collectively pressure coal companies to reduce the output of coal in the relevant markets and disclose future output information. So according to the judge, they have plenty of circumstantial evidence at the very least to suggest that there was pressure put on these companies to do this. The ruling did point out, however, that the states may ultimately be unable to prove their claim that the asset managers used their stock holdings to decrease coal output, or that the defendants entered into an agreement to pressure the coal companies that led to the anti-competitive effects in the relevant coal markets. In other words, he's saying he's not sure without a doubt that they'll be able to prove it. But, that doesn't matter. He thinks that the circumstantial evidence could be enough, so he's going to let it go through. And he also points out, the ruling also noted that the state's claims lack direct evidence of a conspiracy and rely instead on the asset manager's decisions to join the climate initiatives and on circumstantial evidence, which the court conceded is a close call. So they're saying it's going to be a close case, but they're going to still let it go through. Because in my opinion, it's always hard to prove, a direct conspiracy. So you kind of got to go on their actions and their decisions and look at the intention behind it. And that's where court comes into play. Because they'll be questioned on these intentions. And then we can decide if they're good enough answers or not. I'm sorry, he's not the judge, he's the Attorney General, my bad. Attorney General Ken Paxton called the ruling a major victory against Blackrock, State Street, and Vanguard, adding, Blackrock, State Street, and Vanguard, three of the most powerful financial corporations in the world, created an investment cartel to illegally control national energy markets and squeeze more money out of hardworking Americans. Today's victory represents a major step in holding them accountable. Yes! Amen, Ken Paxton. You got a fan in me. In their statements, the asset managers said that they would continue to fight the allegations, with Vanguard saying that it looks forward to the opportunity to vigorously defend against the plaintiff's claims, and State Street adding, there is no collusion here, and we remain confident that the facts and legal substance are on our side. While Blackrock said, this case is not supported by the facts, and we will demonstrate that. Them three said there was no collusion, but yet all three of them are giving statements to the same people, and all three always invest in the same companies together. They always mutually benefit each other. They're each invested in their own companies. So I don't know how that's even possible that they don't collude with each other. They literally have to do their job. So that doesn't even make sense. Dumb statement. Okay, then BlackRock added, by pursuing forced divestment. Okay, let me stop. Give a definition for forced divestment, because I too had to look into that. I'm not that good at the legal terms. But basically, forced divestment is when an entity or an organization is being forced or compelled to sell off some of its assets or a portion of its business. And there are like several reasons why there would be forced divestments on a company. And sidebar, in my opinion, I feel like these forced divestments against BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard should have happened years ago. But here are some of the reasons. And I don't know, you tell me if any of you think that these three could possibly be guilty of any of these reasons. Okay. One reason, which is the main reason I think they're bringing up in this lawsuit, is the antitrust regulations. Regulatory authorities may mandate the divestitures to prevent monopolies and foster fair competition. And an example of this would be like back in the 1980s, AT&T essentially had to do this, give up some of their assets or sell portions of their company because they were monopolizing like the whole communications market. Something I didn't even know happened. I didn't know that happened. Okay, but like another reason, that's just one reason. The antitrust regulations. Another reason could be geopolitical pressures. Like governments can exert pressures for certain companies to divest assets in certain reasons due to, or certain areas due to political or social tensions. And an example of this, a recent example of this, would be when the company BP, the gas company, divested their stake in the Russian company Rosneft right after the Ukraine invasion. They totally divested their stake and claim in a Russian company after that invasion. So we got two reasons so far why they could do this to a company. One's antitrust regulations. The second one I just described is because of geopolitical pressures. But there's more reasons that companies could be forced to do this. Another one could be national security concerns. Like, there's a whole committee on this. The Committee of Foreign Investment in the U.S., the CFIUS. They can order forced divestments of foreign investments in U.S. companies. Meaning they can force, like, if people from other countries or other foreign governments invest in U.S. companies. This committee can make them give up their stakes and claims by reasons of that if like there are national security risks involved with their stakes. Another reason, like, could be if two companies are about to merge or another company is about to acquisition another company. Like, the ones regulating these deals and mergers could stop it. Sorry. Could make it very difficult by doing a merger or acquisition if they feel that if this merge or acquisition would be dangerous for or create like another monopoly. Then they could make okay, well, before you two merge together, company A's got to get rid of these assets or sell off a percentage of their company. Company B's got to get rid of these assets or sell out a portion of their company, and then you guys can merge. Things like that. And the final reason that they could force companies to do this is because of bankruptcy, which we know isn't relatable to this story. But So yeah, there are plenty of reasons that they could make BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street do this. But look what BlackRock said. Let me finish what BlackRock's saying. By pursuing this forced divestment, the Attorney General are undermining the Trump administration's goal of American energy independence. Forcing divestment will harm coal companies' ability to access capital and invest in their businesses and jobs, likely leading to higher energy prices for all Americans. So I don't really understand like what their reasoning is. They're basically like saying that, you ought to think of the best interest for the guys who are suing us. This is going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt us. Well, if that's the case, Blackrock, then what's the problem? Like, you see the deflection there? Trying to say that it's going to undermine the Trump administration, even though the Trump administration is totally for this lawsuit. So, I thought all this was interesting. I wanted to bring it all up, remind you all who the real enemies are. And I'd also like to say that Larry Fink, if you got a puppet master, blink twice if you're in danger. All right, thanks. Have a good day.